Welcome to the Watercolors Aquarium Gallery video series brought to you from the Aquarium Rush Studios in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Today we're talking about everyone's favorite subject, fish food!
Yay.
So I get a lot of questions based around the idea of what should I feed my fish?
Yeah.
And my general answer is, it depends.
What's the best fish food?
Well, so I thought I'd give a quick overview of some of our more commonly used and some of our favorite freshwater fish foods.
I like it.
To give people an idea of, oh, that's what I need, or oh, that's what I want.
Yep.
Well, and this is like pretty crucial stuff because food is often the difference between a fish that looks okay and a fish that looks amazing.
Right.
Yep. By far the most common food used by people who come into the store is going to be the community flake formula.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have anything in particular wrong with it. I just personally don't like flake foods.
Okay.
They dissolve in the water faster, which means that the nutrients aren't reaching your fish and are reaching your algae.
Unless the fish eat it right away.
Unless the fish eat it right away.
Which they should.
They should, but the dissolving time in this is like seconds.
Okay.
You can see that cloud almost immediately.
That's a good point.
So my preference is I feed pellet foods in my fish room.
I do in mine as well.
My go-to is the New Life Spectrum Thera A. A big part of that decision for me is the main ingredient is Antarctic krill, which means that most freshwater fish are not fish eaters, so fish meal in my head shouldn't be the main ingredient.
Okay.
It should be an invertebrate.
Right.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah.
The nice thing about krill also is high in carotenoids, which enhances color.
Makes it prettier.
Yes. The pellet size on this particular one is a little bit big for something smaller like cardinal tetras. So then I would recommend the New Life Spectrum Grow. I use it for my smaller fish because, well, it's a little bit higher in fat and protein, and that some people are like, well, this is designed for growing fish. Well, smaller fish are typically micropredators, not omnivores, so they'd be getting a higher fat protein diet anyways.
That makes all kinds of
That does
sense.
make sense.
So I say, don't go for the smaller pellet, just go for the Grow formula.
And most New Life Spectrum stuff has that little bit of garlic in it too, which makes it smell better to us and to the fish.
Yep. Agreed.
The new, for me, on the market that I was like, oh, that's cool, is bug legs.
Yes.
The
Those
main-
seem to be a great food for microinvertebrate predators.
Oh man, it's so good. The main ingredient in this is black soldier fly larva.
Okay.
That has some really cool things. Most fish in the wild, I mentioned they would be eating invertebrates. They would be eating insect larvae.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
But B, black soldier fly larva is interesting because it's basically eating, like the way these are cultured is they're eating recycled stuff. So it's got a lower carbon footprint than a lot of other ways of growing food for fish.
That's
I
always
like
good to look
that.
out for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So all around, this has been the first pellet food that has impressed me on the market in like a decade. Like, this is so cool.
Nice.
Everything seems to take it. That's the only food I've gotten my puffer on, and they're really well designed so that they sink really slowly. So it was the first pellet food I could try that he had enough time to like stare at it the whole time it goes down and decide, is that food or not? And now he'll eat them off the surface, no problem. It's amazing. So much
Getting
easier
a
for me.
puffer on a dried food is an accomplishment.
That's about like the best props we can give to a food, I think.
yeah.
And it's made my life way easier.
Nice.
Small tetras. I even like the Cocina complex bettas. I normally try to get them on this because they're tiny. So we get a lot of questions about what to feed like plecos and stuff.
Yes.
And I will admit, I have kind of floundered on the answer on that for a long time because I didn't have one that I loved.
It's such a broad statement too.
True.
It's hard to pick a food for plecos because there's so many different eating styles for plecos.
Well, and their eating style and the way that a lot of those wafers are formed means that so much of them is usually filler. It's like soybean meal or wheat being most of the ingredients with a little bit of some other stuff in it. And so it's hard to really get excited about recommending a pleco wafer.
Right.
until we did some testing in our quarantine area, and the Sera catfish chips is now the one that I'm like, all right, that's the
good
Pleco
stuff.
food.
Yeah.
The big deal about it for me is one of the ingredients in it is stuff like alder cones and willow bark.
Sure.
Most-
So for those wood and algae eating plecos, that's fantastic.
Yeah. They need that high fiber, and that's kind of like a lot of foods don't even come close to what I would call a like decent amount in it.
They try to excuse wheat germ for
Yeah.
fiber, and it's just not.
It's not the
a
same,
great fiber product.
at least not for fish.
Yeah.
But catfish chips is what I'd go with, and then the next thing I'll say is, I can imagine people watching this video and saying, "You didn't do a bottom sinking pellet. You didn't do a wafer."
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't. Because this is what I feed my Cory cats, and this is what I feed my Cory cats.
It's perfect.
They don't. A lot of people seem to think that they like a sinking wafer, and I don't think that's their preferred, because in the wild you like to say they're snufflers.
Yeah.
It's a good word. I like that.
Yeah, they like to root around and they like to find things. So if this is sitting on your substrate or whatever kind of bottom you have, they will find it and they'll be like, oh, and you can see that moment of like.
Yeah.
So I think just a good all-around pellet food is the way to go with stuff like that.
I think you call it pure Cory cat bliss.
Yeah.
That's that moment.
Yeah, and sinking foods are all too often just rotting food.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
I will say for the Sera catfish Sera catfish chips, the shrimp food, really similar formula, just as cool, but we're not talking about that today.
This is fish food.
So everything, quick overview. Flake foods are good. I wouldn't say great. Nutritionally, they're going to be a little bit less because in order to make them crispy like that, they need a little bit more filler. But for most people, this is probably the best option for you.
It's easy for
It's very easy,
normal
very
group of
controllable.
fish. Right.
And you can break up to like different sizes for different size mouths, so they're really, really adaptable to different styles of fish keeping.
If you want to take a step up, I would say go with pellet foods. And then if you have a specialty feeder, go with this.
I like it.
And then if you want to take it a step further, frozen foods.
Frozen foods are great.
My go-to frozen food for freshwater fish is, everyone thinks I'm going to say bloodworms. It's brine shrimp.
Really?
Brine shrimp is probably the most nutritionally complete food for most micropredators. Now, bloodworms are great, but I don't use it as a staple food in my fish room. I use it as a fattener or like in quarantine, a lot of our quarantine fish are getting several days of bloodworms in a row.
Right.
Because-
Fatten them up.
Yep.
Yep.
Great treat too, just for any circumstances in the tank.
Great for, I think, a couple times a week, like 2 or 3 times. If it's something like a betta, maybe 4 times, because they can actually process that type of high protein a little bit better.
Right.
But I think if someone like me who's feeding a frozen food almost every day, brine shrimp's the way to go.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
I like
not
it.
even talking about frozen, this array of prepared freshwater foods covers pretty much, I mean, we get a crazy variety of fish here.
Yeah.
And I think with the exception of the herbivorous African cichlids that we have, I think we've got all of our foods on here.
I mean, we're pretty well covered.
I was like, my answer to the African cichlids would be, which Dainichi food do you like?
Yeah, pretty much.
The Dainichi African Cichlid pellets.
They're
Pick the variety. Make sure it's foods designed for African cichlids. That does matter.
Yeah, and that falls under more of the, if you have a specialty fish with a specialty diet, get the food that goes for it. So just like we have the Pleco chips, we've got specific African cichlid food for their diet.
Yep, exactly. I like it. Well, there we go. That's going to make a lot of fun, happy fish. And it's going to make a lot of fun, happy fish keepers. So let's keep those hands wet.